Tuesday, May 16th. Call this meeting to order. Begin with a roll call vote. Roll call? Where the heck is my roll call list? There, no, not there yet. There it is. Okay.
You need a copy.
Director Betty Doherty.
Here.
Director Donna McAleer.
Here.
Director Bob Lux is here. Director Dale Walker.
Here.
Director Mike Wise.
Present.
Thank you. Excellent. And we have a quorum. We have an agenda. Can begin this meeting with the invocation and the pledges of allegiance. Heavenly Father, we come to you today as an assembled body. We humbly request that you bless our meeting, our community, and our nation. Help us to diligently work for the common good and in the best interest of those who we have been elected to represent. Guide us to be insightful and prudent in our thoughts, intentions, visions, plans, deliberations, decisions, and their fulfillment. Work through us to provide a spirit of welcome to all in attendance, to engage in respectful and thoughtful dialogue and discussion with understanding, wisdom, and humility. If you wish, prior to reciting the pledges, you may take an additional moment of silent prayer or reflection in the manner of your preference. Thank you. Pledge allegiance to the United States of America flag. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Pledge to the Texas flag. Honor the Texas flag. I pledge allegiance to thee, Texas, one state, under God, one and indivisible. Thank you. Do we have any comments from the public today? Hearing none, we can go to the consent agenda. This is on pages 1 through 14 of our meeting packet. If there's any questions. Okay, if there are no questions, receive a motion to approve the consent agenda.
Make the motion.
I'd second it.
Motion by Director Wise, seconded by Director Doherty to approve the consent agenda. Further discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstain? Motion passes. Okay, regular agenda. Receive an act upon staff information regarding the upcoming MCAD Board of Directors election for the term of office January 1 to January 1, 2023 through December 2024. That's pages 15 and through 17.
Just an update, Metro Mud last night took the first step in agreeing to participate in the MCAT election. That's the first step. And then with the anticipation that they will nominate Arthur Bredehoff at the June meeting. And then my understanding is Arthur will be approaching MUDs to request support for his election later this year on the MCAT board. He currently sits on the MCAT board. He's, I believe, under the school district slot, ISD slot.
Right.
And he would be asking for a nomination on the special districts position.
Okay,
So no action to be made today, just wanted to let y'all know that was going forward. There really doesn't, every MUD doesn't need to do it.
just a little puzzled by the fact that the agenda says to act.
Mm-hmm.
The same item was put on all the agendas, because it wasn't, we never Metro Mud in advance. If they were gonna be the one to act, or if another mud might, we put the same item on all the agendas, but acting's not required for each mud.
Would discussion be wise to see if there are alternative perspectives or points of view?
There can be, but it would really be more on a subsequent item. This is just to participate in the nominating process. So once you have one district that says they want to, that starts the process. There will certainly be discussion about who potential
Okay.
nominee candidates would be, and.
That'll be at a different day.
Correct.
Okay.
That'll be machine.
Is that acceptable
I
to?
have a question.
Yes,
for
ma'am.
Brian. Our materials, in talking about the qualifications, it seems that if you can stand upright and are breathing is the qualification. Now, there are lots of ineligibility things listed. Is there another list that would give you some qualifications?
This information came directly from.
Them, yeah.
I'd have to ask. I don't know.
Yeah.
They may have just overlooked that piece of paper. I just noticed that.
How we always get it,
Mhm,
you know,
mhm,
they break it down by first degree, third degree, and,
mhm.
you know.
But isn't that who you're related to? And if you have any conflicts, isn't that what that's about?
Yeah,
Yeah.
it talks about degrees of relationship.
Yeah, mhm. That same thing we have to do for Knox.
Correct.
Okay. It'd be good to know what the qualifications are. I just don't have any idea.
I will check.
Mike, did that lady that came and talked to us from there, wasn't she a director or something about, she was from the appraisal district?
Well, I don't know anything about the qualifications.
Okay.
Thought she was the new chief appraiser.
Yeah, that's who she was. Mhm.
Well,
So she wasn't a board member, and that's what we're looking at. Okay.
I would think that you're probably right, that you can stand up, you're qualified, but as the, later on, as voting takes place, people will present their qualifications and you'll be able to pick them who's the most qualified,
Okay.
would be my guess.
Correct.
Seems
And
reasonable.
we do have someone from the Woodlands who's serving on there now, on the Britta Hoff.
Mhm.
And he was nominated by the mud boards last time. And there was still, over the last few cycles, there hasn't been alignment between the township board and the muds, where historically there had been on a candidate. And because of that essential vote splitting, it negated the ability for the Woodlands to have someone on the board for a special purpose district position. And so Arthur was able to get seated by one of the local school districts.
Mhm.
And I think they had an opening from a vacancy. Arthur said yesterday at the metro meeting that he thinks that there may be, with the change in the township, there may be an opportunity, who thinks there is an opportunity here for muds in the township to become aligned again in support. So it sounds like he thinks he could get township support, is what I took away from his comments.
Okay.
And he's the one that's not,
I remember, don't they have all the votes anyway, right? I mean, they can, if everybody goes one way and the township goes another way, they win, right?
They don't,
That's inaccurate?
they don't have
Okay.
enough to win. You've got to have them. They're necessary, but not sufficient.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay. Okay. Like that.
Yeah, I do too. I'm huge that.
Pay for that
Go ahead,
degree.
Bill.
By golly, it's nice to see. Okay, so that item is been satisfied. Okay, thank you. Agenda item 10, receive San Jacinto River Authority Woodlands Division report, including update on infrastructure funding, Bear Branch Dam rehabilitation, Bear Branch low flow vault lid replacement, Bear Branch monitoring system, and to present the draft of the Woodlands Division fiscal year 24 budget. Oh, pardon me. I got a little ahead of myself. I was so impressed by your, aren't we a little tardy if this term of office begins January 1st in 2023, and here we are on May 16th?
The term for this one's at 24, isn't it?
Yes.
Oh, so there's an error in the
No,
agenda? item?
it's 31st to 24. His term. Oh, no, that is wrong. I just thought. That is wrong.
So the term is actually January 1, 2024.
Yes.
Okay, we'll correct that in the minutes, please. Okay. Thanks.
Worry about that next time.
I mean, that'll be in the minutes,
Okay.
so we can either approve or reject. them
Yeah.
based on-
Think it-
Okay. Rewind to agenda item 10. I'm not going to read it all over again. Summer.
Begins on page 18 and goes all the way through page 63 of your packet. The updates on the items mentioned can be found in your packet, and I can answer any questions on those items before we present the fiscal year 24 budget.
Okay. Yeah, I see our past dues on page 33, which is one of my favorite topics. Past due receivables, 60 days are pushing $30 million. Just for the record, I have a question on page 34. The fault line project, when will that study be completed? Do we know?
Taking the soil borings samples,
Mhm.
those were done a week or two ago. And so I know that they're working on getting that report to us.
Okay.
But as far as when the full study will be complete, I don't know the end date.
There was nothing in the contract as far as a deliverable? Okay. I'm just curious. I don't know that it's gonna affect things one way or another, but it sounded, when I read it, like it was a bit open-ended. Okay.
Oh,
Okay, now we're to the budget. Okay.
Unnecessary.
I did have a question.
Yes.
Phrase tabletop did they put out maps? Or is that kind of like he did a first pass interpretation? The faults. He uses the phrase tabletop.
Initiated tabletop analysis is the
Is
word.
that basically laying all the materials out and going over the current status and how we're standing? Is that? Yeah, because I was kind of curious. That's kind of a general phrase. Normally you get around a drafting table and you lay things on top of each other. And you look, see if there's any relationships or where you're standing, but it's not a written report. No.
I would have to follow up with our engineer that's handling this project.
Okay. Yeah, because, that, just want to see what they meant by tabletop.
I have a question.
Generally.
It's not nearly as complex as Dale's. He's much more erudite.
Right.
But this says at the bottom of it that the green is the finished product and the yellow is the unfinished product. Well, I realize that I got two colors here, but which is which? Which page are you? This one.
Right, so
Oh, page.
That is page 23.
the breakup of project, green are for new projects and yellow, I believe, are for the completed ones. If you look at the one from last month, we did have a green one and we had a yellow one. The change from last month to this month, we don't have any new projects.
So that's
that
why
were
we don't
added.
have the green and yellow
Correct.
there.
And no
Okay.
projects were closed.
I just thought maybe y'all like these colors. That's all.
No,
Okay, got it. Thank you for that.
Further questions before we dive into the FY 24 Woodlands Division budget? Which begins on page.
So page 37 starts with the executive summary of the budget. And then you'll find your draft budget on page 39. And then on page 47 will be the presentation Haley will cover with you all.
Okay, I'm gonna move out of the way here.
That's the one.
And-
I do have a bunch of presentations, so, save your eyes if you don't mind.
Thank you, Haley.
All right, here we go.
My head.
So as Summer mentioned, my name is Haley Mahan and I am the Woodlands accountant for SGRA. And I'm here to share our fiscal year 24 budget with you all. As a reminder, tonight is just information. And, the vote for this will be in July for the individual MUDs and August for the trustees to then give their vote recommendation to our board for final approval and vote for the fiscal year 24 rates to take effect. Summer might have Ms. Lawrence repeated Thursday.
Yes, thank you
Just
for that.
realized. you missed
Yes,
that.
Thursday, you all should have had an invitation. We're doing a deep dive into the project plan as well as the budget. So for those of you who haven't responded, we're still taking RSVPs. So if you'd like to attend, we'd love to have you.
So with that being said, this presentation is just our overview into the budget, and like she said, Thursday will be a deeper dive into budget and project planning. So, go ahead. So whenever we're putting together our budget, there are some considerations, assumptions, and things that we look at before starting our budget process and analyzing it to bring it to y'all. So the first thing that we look at is our sales and our demands of what we think we can produce and what we think we can treat as far as water and wastewater. So there is no change in our demands for wastewater for FY 24. We are increasing our water sales for FY 24 because of a reduction in water loss from 9% to 5.5%. So basically, we're able to sell more water in FY 24 than 23 based on the same production due to some of the meters and other things that we can account for that water now. So the next thing that we look at is our cost increases that we're seeing historically. So a lot of these are the same as what we saw last year. They haven't given up and they're still going up in cost, is our chemicals, our chlorine and other chemicals, and sludge hauling. Our electricity is still going up. Payroll, as most places, goes up every year with cost of living and merit adjustments. And the last one is public communications. So the public communications, we have been asked to help fund a consultant to help the MUDs get across the message that's going to be coming with the high dollar projects that we have coming up in the Woodlands. So the public communications consultant is going to be in the FY 24 budget. The next thing that we look at is our project plan and what do we need to fund our project plan. So the typical transfer that we look at is for our R&R fund, and we are keeping that constant at 6 million from FY 23 to FY 24. So we will, this budget and operating rates will fund 6 million of a transfer to R&R. And the last thing that we look at, and not the last thing, we look at a lot of things, but the last thing we're going to talk about today that we look at is our blend ratio. So our blend ratio is how much water, groundwater versus surface water that we produce in the Woodlands, and we are keeping that steady at the 50% for FY 24. And it is an annual average, so we might have a higher one month and lower next month, but the average is to keep it around that 50-50 blend. Right. So that was a lot of information on kind of our overall of what we look at in the budget, but there are some things that are in our budget that we have been asked to keep in or look at year to year. So this is just a quick update on a few items in our budget and what the status of it is for our FY 24 budget. So we have these stream gauges all across the Woodlands. I think there's says 7 there. And those stream gauges are not going away, but they have found other funding partners for them. Some are Bear Branch, our flood management division. Harris County, I think, is taking some. So the cost of those gauges is coming out of the FY 24 budget for Woodlands, but the gauges are not going anywhere. I do have that 6250 there because the contract runs through October 1st, which covers 1 month of FY 24 for us. So if you do see that line item in the draft budget that's in y'all's packet, that is why it's just to cover that first month to get it through the end of the contract. So the next thing that we're looking at, and we have decided to end at the end of the contract, is the lobbyist. This is the same thing where we don't end the contract just because the fiscal year ends, so we are carrying it through the end of our contract with them, which is December of 23, so that's 4 months into our fiscal year. So you will see 40,000 in the budget for that lobbyist there. So this one is just a summary snapshot of the items that are in your draft budget packet, just to have them up on the screen and to, show y'all the different line items and the variances from 23 to 24 for each of those line items. So as I said, this is just a summary, and I do have more information on further slides that covers some of these things in more detail. But is there any questions so far?
You're alluding to the lobbyist contract because they're done?
Not necessarily because they're done, but because I think that one, if the MUDs showed more interest, we would renew it. But I think at this time, the interest is maybe in a kind of variable state. I don't know. It's not been.
I might be the only one that's interested. I spent last month on the telephone writing to the legislature, but I used to be a lobbyist, and so I know that you're always busy, doing relationships. And so you really don't stop just because Tiny Guy happens. You're still working. So I just, FYI.
Yeah, and I think that's one that we could continue that relationship if there was interest or buy-in from the MUDs, but I don't know if you have more information on that.
Just right now, the consensus we were getting was that we were asked not to put in the fiscal year 24 budget, but in December, when their contract comes up for renewal, at that time, if we get a different vibe from you all, and if you guys say no, we like what they're doing, we do want to continue it, that is something we can discuss at that point.
Who is the lobbyist or firm lobbyist? Firm?
It's Cornerstone.
Cornerstone?
EPA might be there after them, so Cornerstone and government or something, but it's Cornerstone, and they're based out of DC. Or at least the ones that are looking for us, they're out of DC and Austin. All right, well, if there's no other questions, I'll keep going. So I have this slide in here just to remind y'all about our contract and the operating reserve requirements that we have to have because of that contract. So we have met our operating reserve requirement for FY 23, and we anticipate making that for 24, or continuing to make that. As you can see here, we have a 3-month target and a 2-month minimum that we have to keep per contract. This is based on our expenses for the year, our operating expenses, and needing to keep 3 months worth of operating expenses in this reserve, essentially, which is our bank account. So the FY 24 3-month target is about 5.6 million that we need to keep that much cash at a minimum on hand to meet that contract requirement with you all. And like I said, we have met that for FY 23. So the operating reserve that you will see in the budget, it's an operating reserve contribution, and it's basically to take us from last year's 3-month target to this year's. So if we have increased expenses, since that's basis of our reserve requirement, then that also our target goes up. So it's going up by between 200 and 300,000. So you will see that line item in the budget, and it's just because we have to account for those dollars to be essentially reserved at this point. So if you do see that in our other cash uses sources section, that's what it's about this time.
And that's a direct correlation between the increase in expenses.
Yes.
That's how that's been arrived at.
Yes, excluding our GRPDs. So we do, when we do this calculation, we do take out essentially the cost to buy water out of this calculation to do our 3-month operating per contract for y'all. Otherwise, this reserve number would be way higher, but since we don't have to, buy water if there's, something catastrophic that happens, in theory, not in reality, because we wouldn't be able to pay bills if we couldn't buy water and then sell it, but if we, won't go to the next slide. So this slide is just to show our demands really, and the main focus of this slide is that chart over to the right. As you can see here, This is to show you where our rate was for FY '23 and where we want it to be for FY '24 and what the drivers of that was, what the drivers are to get us to those two rates. So if you see the FY '23 rate at $2.73, and then you see we have this water loss savings that we're saying because we changed our water loss percentage from 9% to 5.5%, we're saving 23 cents on raising the rate. So if we did not make that water loss change, we would have to have raised our rate 23 cents. So we have that savings there, but our expenses still went up. And the water loss savings doesn't affect wastewater, so you can see that's zero there. But it doesn't affect, our increased expenses did affect water and wastewater. So you can see the water rate went up 28 cents, but it is offset by that 23 cent savings. So it really only went up 5 cents on the rate. Oh, thanks. Who I can blind with this, I'll be careful. Shaky hands on it, off in the eye. But the increased expenses on wastewater is 12 cents. So you can see that it's about a 2% increase in our rate from 23 to 24 for water and for wastewater. So the main thing to look at this, and yes, we were able to keep the rate at 2%, but one thing that Hugh has pointed out, and he pointed out at the trustees meeting, I'm glad he reminded me, this water loss savings that we're able to reduce the rate because of is not a continuous year over year item. So we are at 2% now, but it's not like next year, even if we kept expenses flat, we'd be taking another 23 cents off the rate. So that's not to say next year's rate will go up by 28 cents. It's just that particular line item is specific to this year, and it's not a continuous.
I think that one thing that should be noted is that savings is directly related to the investment that was made in the smart meters.
Mhm.
So, I mean, we're seeing a payback already,
Yes.
and it will only continue.
I don't know what all it was related to, but it is, the meters definitely played a role in that, because if we're able to account for water, then we can bill the proper person for water, and we don't have to have this overhead amount that we're billing everyone a little piece of it to account for that water. That we, just because someone used it, we also have to buy that water essentially, so we have to pay that cost. So the meters definitely have helped to facilitate that cost to the right person. So, all right, any other questions on this slide?
Okay.
So as I mentioned, our chemicals is one of the costs that we saw go up last year, and it's not going to continue. Hopefully it doesn't, but it is still going up for this year. So the graph here shows our chlorine. We buy our chlorine by the ton. It's $17.47 as of March. They increased our price for our next contract, which is April to April with our supplier. And they raised the price to like $2,300 now. So it's gone up about $500 per ton, which is why you'll see here, we're not necessarily using that much more chlorine, but it's just the price per ton has drastically gone up. So the chemicals number you're seeing over there includes all of those chemicals listed there, but it's just chlorine that is scrapped. So,
Is there a similar increase in the others? If you were to graph the others, would they run a rather consistent line of increase?
don't think they would go up to the same level that chlorine has gone up. And I'm not, in some of them, they are dependent on our blend as well. We're not changing the blend from 23 to 24. So the alkalinity is not going to be affected by that particular thing. But when the blend changes, the alkalinity changes. I don't think those chemicals went up as much as chlorine did to that same magnitude without pulling that to look at it again. Or actually, we have it in the budget here. I can look at that in a minute.
That's
But I don't think that we grabbed
I
chlorine.
think
and we
you've answered that satisfactorily. Thank you.
Yeah.
They've increased, but not perhaps to that drastic measure.
So one of the other things that we look at is our staffing and our FTE plans to make sure that we have the right staffing numbers in the Woodlands and the right type of staffing. So our indirect help, which is our accounting, engineers, PR and purchasing and all of those different departments that help indirectly the Woodlands and our direct staff in the Woodlands. So if you'll notice on the graph here, Ed made it a point to point out how much Chris has worked to reduce the direct staff needed to run the Woodlands with sharing staff with GRP and just having our staff trained to do different things in the Woodlands so that we can continue to reduce our direct number of people needed, which is in the blue up there. So you can see it went from 42 to 36.5 over a span of 6-7 years there. And so the other thing that we look at with our staffing is our FTE plans, but also just the cost of the staff that we have. Our assumptions are the same for FY23 as they are for FY24, which was a 4% merit and promotion increase and a 2% inflationary adjustment, which is the COLA adjustment if they do that for FY24. So as you can see, staffing is important to us, and those are the assumptions that we use when creating our budget. And then on the next slide, if you're curious about how we reduced our direct staff by 0.7 and why we increased it by the, it was 2.8. This slide shows all of the changes to our indirect departments. And then that last one that says Woodlands is our direct staff. Let's see if I can look this thing. That's our direct. So you see it went down 0.7. But all the rest of them are indirect departments, and you can see over to the side as to why we have made the adjustments in those departments that we have. So most of it is the result of the project plans coming up, leading for engineers, accounting staff, and everything to make that happen for us. So as I mentioned in the beginning, some of the costs that are going up for us. One of them is our electrical cost is going up. We received direction to increase our budget for electrical by our historical usage plus 10%. So if you see that utilities 25% and it's not 10%, and that's because it's based on our historical usage and not last year's budget. So our electrical cost is going up there. Okay. So on this slide, I took the budget that y'all have in your packets and I just looked at our operating budget because this is our operating budget drives our operating rates, which is what we're here to talk about. So this slide takes all of those items in that operating budget, and if there was a variance of $20,000 or more, so positive or negative change, and a 20% positive or negative change in the variance from 23 to 24, we included it here just to show a description of why that particular line item went up in cost, up or down, and had a change in cost. So I believe this is second to last slide. If you don't have any questions, and we'll go over the rates and the vote one more time. So on this slide, it's just in summary, our rates that are what we are asking for a vote on is the $2.78 per 1,000 gallons for water and $5.65 per 1,000 gallons for wastewater. And like I said, that's about a 2% increase for both of those rates. So this, like I said in the beginning, is for your information, and we will be asking for your vote in July at the individual MUDs and then in August for the trustees. So if you don't have any other questions, that's all I have for you today.
What's the chlorine cost increase due to constraints of manufacture and transportation?
I think it's a little bit of everything,
Both.
but the biggest driver, gonna mess up what states it's in, but the biggest driver was there's plants that have been completely out of commission and will be out of commission for, I think, a couple years going forward. So where we can get our supply,
That's what I was wondering.
where we can get our supply, but also where everybody else can get their supply.
Right, so-
is, reduced.
It's a constraint on the current production,
Correct.
and maybe some of those plants don't meet current regulations that happen in refineries. everybody says, well, what did you do to one of the oldest refineries in New Jersey? Well, it got shut down. And it drove the prices of gasoline in that area up. And if there's only a few places that are making chlorine and you're having to ship it a long distance, that's gonna definitely increase your costs.
That increased it, but the number one of it is just the limited places that can even produce it.
Yeah.
And they're limited because,
They had one plant, I think there was an actual plant issue that some sort of a disaster within the plant caused it to go out of commission. I think one of the other ones I heard Jason maybe say it was scheduled for maintenance and it's just gonna be out until it's up to speed.
Well, I think,
That manufacturer wants it to be.
Yeah.
Is that one of those chlorine plants that exploded that was on the news?
Think so, but that one that exploded might have been a year and a half or more ago, because we've been seeing chlorine prices go up for a while.
Mhm.
Now it might have been. I'd have to ask just for more details on exactly what the chlorine situation is and what plants it was affected. But.
is that in the Gulf area, in the Gulf of Mexico, or up the
I'm sorry,
Mississippi?
I'm thinking it was over in like the Louisiana area.
That's what I was wondering.
Totally be wrong.
Yeah, well, it's probably associated with the Mississippi River area, that area,
Louisiana.
Louisiana.
They look up now.
And they probably have to meet,
The same meetings as me, somebody knows, Louisiana.
and they probably have to meet new standards if they do a refurbish or overhaul.
The regulations drive
Yeah.
everything.
Yeah, I mean, as long as you're operating and
Most of the time recently they're out of control in their regulations. No consideration of what it costs us to do.
you know. Okay, I just was curious.
No, that's what we've been seeing with Corey is the plant issues. They're just going up. But I don't have anything else to ask.
Excellent presentation.
very good.
Thank you.
We have to do anything else for us?
Just to present and receive, like, as she said, July, August, and September is kind of the key dates when
Yeah.
they'll be back with asking for approvals, first of all, from the MUDs in July, then by the Board of Trustees in August, and then ultimately it'll go to the SJRA board. Okay, I believe that we are now to the June.
Number 11?
Agenda item 11, receive update regarding Bear Branch, Panther Branch Research Forest Drive drain improvement projects, pages 46 and, 64 and 6 to 66. Is that Summer? Is that yours?
On page 61.
Yeah.
That updates the work and progress we have done in relation to the vault. And then if you flip to page 62, it gives you a summary of all the activities done in April and the beginning of May. And then page 64 is a summary sheet of all the work for the Bear Branch drainage improvement.
Which page is the summary sheet?
Page
65?
64. is
64,
everything.
okay.
Yes. You guys have any questions on those documents? Let me know and I will get with our engineer and give you those answers.
Well, what caught my attention, which is never anything that's engineering, is how many every week, starting with the 6th, they note that there's graffiti. Did they paint it every week? Or they refer to painting it down in the last week?
I can follow up and get that answer for you.
And the other thing is that on the spillway embankment, they've sprayed and they're monitoring to see the browning out. Does that mean they're looking at the grass to see if it's dying or the weeds or whatever? Is that what that means?
I believe so, yes. ma'am.
Okay, thank you.
I drive up and down Kirkendall past the Bear Branch Dam, if that's where they're
Mhm.
speaking. And A few months ago, I brought it to their attention about the graffiti and they got right after it and they've been very, very
Mhm.
prompt and it's an unfortunate situation, but they're taking it very seriously and trying to do the best they can to keep ahead of it. So it doesn't look like, something that we don't want it to look like.
I
As
just
you
wondered
drive
if they
by.
had to do it every
not
week,
trivial.
which
Oh,
I
we do.
wouldn't be surprised if they did.
Lots of Fisher people there and,
Mhm.
you know, the kids will be kids. I think they skateboard around there, and do all sorts of stuff. Okay,
Well, let me ask another question that everybody probably knows the answer to. When we talk about the vault, low flow valve vault, that's not the same thing that we were concerned about having the handle on to close it off, is it?
I would have to follow up with that, Miss Betty. I'm not sure.
Because it's taken a real long time to get that handle. Mike and I had a concern about it. And so I just wondered if that was all in the same thing.
It looks like on page 61, in the report, it said that they did install the
Yeah,
patch.
uh-huh. Yeah, I saw that. So that there was a lot more than just getting the handle, which is what we were worried about. Yeah, thank you for clarifying that.
I do remember you're correct. There was some part or piece that was, on a lengthy backlog.
Mhm.
There's a top floor, was it?
Mhm.
I don't know, was it?
Yeah, it was the lid.
The
Yeah.
whole lid, because we were worried about somebody falling in it, and they had to get
A safety basket or something,
Mhm.
yeah.
which is what they're referencing, it's all new access hatch. That
Mhm.
would be the whole thing.
But there's
It's
still,
locked where they can't.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thanks.
okay. I guess that takes care of it. Further discussion on agenda item 11. Agenda item 12, receive update on SJRA-led Spring Creek Detention Study. Again, Summer, you were there.
On May 2nd, a town hall meeting at the township. And I believe it was very well attended. But if you guys have any questions on that, please let us know, and we'll be happy to get those answered.
I too was there and I thought that Mr. Barrett did an outstanding job of presenting to the public and the public was, you know, adequately received. Of course, you'd always like to see more, but they were engaged and they were participatory in the meetings.
That
And,
Denali is a pretty good turnout for something like that, you know.
yeah, and it was worthwhile. Then the way that you pardon me?
Is there any real pertinent update that we need to know about?
I think we've had the updates. I mean, this was just bringing it to the public, you know, it's pretty much the same information, but the way that they staged it was really good on 30-minute increments to allow people who came in late to say, well, you know, if you just want to wait a minute or two, you can start from the beginning, but you know, you're free to go in if you'd like. But they did a really good job. If you recall, yesterday or day before, I sent you
Mhm.
an update that I'd learned, seen in the Impact Magazine about Montgomery County plans home buyouts pending funds.
Yeah.
And the purpose of sending that is we're attending meetings on a somewhat regular basis with all of the other stakeholders. And I'd like to get a feeling from the board whether, knowing what you know now, we want to proceed with having this study go forward, stop it, or adopt an all of the above plan, being do whatever detention we can upstream and perhaps buy out some homes that are in jeopardy.
You have another copy of that in your folder.
I don't, but I can give you this one.
Okay. I just need a picture always. But here's my question about what we have in our packet. On page 65, it says that this is, regarding the MUD 67 Fair Branch drainage improvements. And then we go over to the Spring Creek.
Apples and oranges.
Well, we skipped over this. We didn't say, nobody said anything about this, is why I'm asking.
This,
Yeah, if it's apples and oranges, if that's why I was asking, if this is a part of the,
no,
well, we did talk about it.
The memorandum, and I'll have to double check, who submitted this, but this goes in connection with,
this is research forest, yeah.
Yeah, the reason, that's what I thought. I just
Yeah.
wanted to clarify that because that's what I thought it was. But then y'all jumped to the Spring Creek thing, so.
It says Bear Branch, and I thought that was part of Mud 60.
It-
Why is it-
we are a
We are a
participant,
part
we
of
are a
it.
participant in that,
Okay.
as we are a minor, small participant in both the Bear Branch, Panther Branch Research Forest Project, as well as the Spring Creek Detention Study.
And what we're going to decide on is the Spring Creek detention.
Well, we closed off agenda item 11. We're moving to now agenda item 12.
Why is it that I am lost? But I don't answer that.
It's okay. Here we go.
Okay, that was the purpose of my sending around that document, because we, as we continue with this study, it's very apparent that at best, it's going to be decades before there's going to be any relief to those unfortunate people who are being routinely flooded because of just what it takes to get some of these major projects done. Now, I guess why I asked that we either stop it, continue it, or do an all of the above would be, perhaps the all of the above would be to allow the retention upstream to occur. And it's going to be smaller than we'd hoped when it started, but it'll be something. And then also use the buyout to take, that is funded by the county and federal government and others in an attempt to immediately satisfy some of the flooding that occurs should Spring Creek exceed its banks.
I was thinking, in my opinion, if I understand where you're going with this or what you're saying, I think we need to stay in the study to see and get whatever reduction we can possibly get on the downstream flow. But on the other hand, based on what you said, it's going to be decades. I think we'd be foolish not to continue buying out those properties that are highly in jeopardy. And so I think we ought to need to do both in my mind.
I'm just looking for direction.
A couple of comments, excuse me, on buyouts, federal buyouts are usually initiated by the property owner, supported by the local government. And it has very high thresholds to meet criteria for being a candidate for buyout. Typically, homes that meet that threshold were built prior to the floodplain management programs being adopted. They flood extensively, not an inch or two or 6 inches, but my understanding, and I think it's worth exploring to verify what I think I know, is to qualify for those buyouts. It's generally not available to communities where homes were built and after the floodplain management regulations were imposed.
When was it?
Back in the 70s and 80s.
Oh.
I know, for instance, River Plantation was built before those were imposed. Timber Lakes, Timber Ridge was built before any floodplain regulations in Montgomery County were imposed. And that's where you're going to generally see the buyouts is in those areas that were built prior to floodplain regulations.
And that's also where the most flooding takes place.
Exactly. And there is severe flooding. It's not usually an inch.
They bury the houses a lot of
It's
times.
the rooftop are up several feet.
Yeah.
But we can do some research to verify that, but I think what I'm telling you is fairly accurate.
The houses down Sawdust Road,
Yeah, over
where they go halfway up to the brick, where they were flooded
down.
over and over again.
Timberlock, I believe it is.
Timber Lakes, Timber Ridge area, there's
Yeah.
quite a few homes in there that, again, were built. And they're actually in the floodplain, many of them. And when they flood, and you'll notice some of them are not on the buyout because the owner is not requesting that. They use those as rental homes and are not interested in being
I see. Yeah.
bought out.
So to continue this though, just looking for our ratepayers, we're a very small participant in this study and so forth. Does this board want to direct me when it comes to votes to continue in the study or to withdraw? Because we have very few homes that are affected
Our mud.
in our, and that's, you know, who we would be, I forget the number, I've got it in my folder
Any
here.
homes that are affected in our mud? I don't,
You,
Yes, along
yeah,
Spring Creek.
along Spring
Okay.
Creek, along Flint Ridge, probably.
Aren't we talking about in that particular study and project, something that is extremely long-term? And
Mhm.
the amount of rain that's fallen out of the sky is considerably more than it has been in a long time. And I think they're expecting more and more flooding. Wouldn't it be prudent for us to be in there because it's the greater good of the community?
That's one thought process, and the other process, I now see where Bob is going with this, would make some sense. I'd be interested to know just how many homes we have in
Yes.
160 that are affected.
How many homes?
We're talking about 5 or 500, you know, the type of thing.
It's closer to that.
Those are 5, and then
The other thing is the runoff is increasing because as you have more, more building, there's less it can soak. You're gonna get more runoff. So there may end up being more homes in our mud that get affected.
but most all the new building requires detention or retention to be
Yes.
built along with that new building.
Yes.
So that new building shouldn't
You
contribute.
should hope that it would be mitigated by the dry pond that
Right.
gets filled during the storm.
That didn't happen in, I know Creekside's not part of our concern, but there was some potential already thought about detention and retention, and yet places still flooded in Creekside.
Yes, and if you look at the maps, the USGS publishes those and they do the different storm events by, was it a 100-year
Yeah.
event? Was it a 50-year event, 25? Those were developed decades ago. And then we have the ongoing problem of subsidence, which, we've got subsidence.
Well, I think when we went to the very first meeting where the USGA, I mean, they had huge maps at
Yeah.
Rob Fleming. And they said they were redoing the maps that are the 100-year and the 500-year.
And I don't know if those have been published yet.
Yeah, I mean, I
Have to
figured
look.
it'd take a long time, but there is I mean, that's something to consider. I mean, I'm, a long-range person. I think that's what I'm sitting here doing, is trying to think about the future and water and availability and.
I would like going forward to consider that we gather more information on, number one, how much are we paying to contribute to this? And number two, how many houses or homes are directly affected in Mud 60? And then come back and look at that again. And to answer your question.
That's a good idea.
Just for clarification, we are operating now under a Texas Water Development Board grant of up to $500,000. That's what's been paying for everything so far. Now,
Including our contribution.
we have yet to make a contribution.
Okay.
That's where I'm going. We're going to soon have to write a check if this is going to go forward. And I'd like to know if this board wants to do that. The other partners, and they're majority partners, far in excess of our participation. Mud 46, Mud 60, Mud 386, Mud 1 and Mud 7, and the city of Humble are the other partners in this study. Yes,
Yes. Your kids have already contributed to this.
it was,
Quite
we
few
were
months
a
ago,
few $1,000 or
Yeah,
something.
yours was minimal. But for you, we looked it up not too long ago, but it's been paid for, invoiced and paid for quite a while back.
Out of the grant or out of our?
Well, your contribution based on a kind of a complex formula with the city of Humboldt, Harris County Flood Control District, San Jacinto River Authority's in-kind contribution, and the various MUDs and what they agreed at some point in the past to contribute. Yeah, they haven't spent it all. And what I think what Bob is maybe getting to is, do we want to vote to just stop it and give our contribution back? And it's going to be, like, what they haven't spent would be minimal at this point.
Well, I think
We can figure out what that is.
I'd want to know and add to that list I stated earlier is what does it look like our contribution is going to have to be in the future? You know, we write a $2 million check for
And there
$2,000.
is no future contribution required or promised or even talked about at this.
Yes, but there will be if we're going to
I
continue.
think, well, my personal opinion is the next point is such a big ticket item, it gets out of the mud arena and goes to a much more widespread, higher level of government.
So we're essentially only paying or participating in the study.
We've been doing a jump start to get
Okay.
this study jump started to see if it was a viable project.
Yeah, the discussion early on was that this was a regional problem. It was gonna require a lot more participation by larger entities than the Woodlands MUDs. The project to be a reality. I think that my recollection is the Woodlands MUDs participated to get, as Jim said, this study started because we knew there was such a long lead time. But once we came to a conclusion on the location of the potential sites, hydrology, what would it potentially accomplish? Then it's got to be state through grants, loans, county, other larger entities that are going to have to pick up the football and run with it because it's well out of the mud arena.
So what you're saying, Brian, is we really don't have another check to write. Our check's already been written, this study needs to be done, and then there's somebody above or bigger than us is gonna make a decision to go forward.
Yeah, unless what happened, we're well into speculation land at this point, about this far down the road, but, let's say you've got, some larger entities that, come up to the plate and you got an opportunity for federal funds. If there may be a request back to smaller entities, include the MUDs. Hey, will you pay this piece of this much larger amount? So we can't say that there's no future requests that would be coming the MUDs way, but there's no way that financially the MUDs could foot the bill for what would be necessary for this, nor should they.
So it's a decision down the road. We shouldn't really have to do anything. We wait for somebody to pick up the ball and come back and say, they're gonna spend this, and if you want us to spend that, you're gonna spend this. And then we got a decision to make at that time.
That's correct.
Well, are we coming to the end of this contract with Half, Jim, to your knowledge?
Yeah,
So
we're approaching.
we're all in right now, and that's that. And then once
Only if the funding is agreed, look, this doesn't look viable, we don't want to go forward with it, then you could potentially get a rebate or refund of what was unspent, depending on that formula. But we're pretty close to either it's a viable project or it isn't.
I was of the misunderstanding that when this contract concluded, that they were going to say, okay, now here's the next phase. Here's what we have to do to get this.
If it's concluded and it's viable, then again, it goes to much higher level of government to see if they want to pick the ball up and run with it. And then if they want to come back and ask anybody to participate. There's no obligation at this point.
Isn't there usually, to get federal funds or even state funds, local participation of some type
Match,
match
Mhm.
of some?
financial match.
But I think we got that down the road to decide, and if we wanted the project to go forward, maybe it's an obligation for our very small piece has to be there to get the thing to go forward, and we probably want to do that.
Yeah.
Depending on the size of it. So I think it's down the road, right?
Yeah, but based on the cost benefit ratio or analysis that was recently done, I mean, there's thousands of properties that are not part of our MUDs that could benefit from this up and down Spring Creek. And you would expect all of those governmental entities that would be positively impacted would be asked to participate as well.
To follow up on Mike's request, could we please get a list of the that in MUD 60 that have been
We have
affected?
information
Yeah.
Yeah, you had told me that one time that oftentimes some of the people for personal reasons, they choose not to make
But they'd
this
be
public. information.
Persuaded, perhaps they don't realize they might benefit if, even if they have rental property, they could just use that money and rent someplace else. You know,
They don't
buy
want
other
the-
property.
They don't want the
They don't want to be on record when they go to
Right.
sell their property, this
Yeah.
property flooded. So
Mhm.
you're not going to get those people who probably just step forward.
It's a,
Now, they might be legally supposed to say that.
Uh-huh.
And that goes back to the homes that are in your mud that flood are gonna be minimal damage that they can they can correct, and we would never have information.
Yeah.
Because we get our information just from debris sitting out in the streets as we drive through the neighborhoods. And if anybody's willing to visit with us,
Mhm.
it's just a visual observation. But it's not uncommon for the homeowner to fix it and not be any evidence of a flooded home anywhere around the house.
Well, we might add in that if it's possible to tell me you could do this when you're going through, you have knowledge of ones that have.
We have,
Maybe you could even throw a little estimate in there based on where where Mud 60 runs into a floodplain or something like that, that you could say there's somewhere between 10 and 20 homes or 30 homes or.
we could, but I think it's better just use the data that where it's obvious
Backed up.
and we have strong evidence rather than going in a public meeting and speculating that a home flooded.
Oh, yeah, yeah, okay.
Summer, I don't recall that Matt has ever mentioned it, nor do I recall from the meetings that I've attended when Health said that they're going to have their final deliverable. Do you happen to know that? Okay, thank you. Further discussion on agenda item 12? Thank you. The much anticipated attorney's report for this. I don't think so. I don't think so. I think we're just getting wound up.
Well, so just to not go through and repeat a lot of what we covered at the trustee meeting, and did go through a number of bills that are still quote unquote viable in the legislative session. Would encourage y'all to take a look at that video if there are particular bills of interest to you. This is the point in the session where a lot of stuff is starting to get on the chopping block. So we're down for the last 2 weeks. The deadline for bills to move out of the house, initially move out of the house, is already passed. So if you are looking at bills on Texas Legislature Online and it shows that it's still pending in the House or is in House committee or is on a calendar in the House, unless it's already moved from the Senate, it's already dead. If it has passed the House, for instance, and is over in the Senate, it's still viable. There are a lot of political cross currents right now at the legislature that could potentially slow down the movement of bills. There's a lot of friction between the House and the Senate right now on issues of property tax reform or additional property tax reform, school vouchers, gun legislation. There's a number of things where there's some significant disagreements between the House, especially on vouchers and property taxes, between the House and the Senate that could jam things up in the last 2 weeks and could cause collateral damage, which we've seen in the past, unfortunately, where some bills that have nothing to do with the issues that are really of political contention end up dying because you just run out of time. There's so much discussion and debate over some of these hot topic issues that it runs out the clock on items that don't have anything to do with those issues. So
What bill are you referring to? You hadn't given us a number
for which,
that we're concerned about getting caught in the cross current.
well, there are a number of bills that are still out there and pending. I mean, if you want to go through, list some of them.
There's on pages 90.
Well, I don't know how many of them were covered in.
Yeah, you gave us the list.
96 and 97 is the
Yeah.
only list that we have.
Yeah,
96 and 97.
Yeah.
that right there. That's your list of legislative things.
Mine says
So.
55.
So for instance, we talked before
Look in the
about,
dark letters down there that you can't see in the brown down there.
For instance, we talked before about House Bill 1793 that deals with director qualifications.
Mhm.
That would change the qualifications for a director from either being someone who owns property in the district or and or a resident to only being one that owns property. So if you qualify as a director by virtue of living in the district and renting by rental, you would be disqualified. That bill has passed the House and is in Senate committee, but hasn't come out yet. So we don't know where that's gonna be.
What I'm most interested in is 1540.
That
And last time I saw it came out clean from the Senate
Where's
and, so
It's
it
not
doesn't
on
have
this
the
list.
amendment on it.
That's the one we're
That's
talking about.
correct.
though.
That's what I've been,
Yeah.
that's what I've been told as well. The hearing was at the very end, when it was passed out, it wasn't entirely clear what left the committee. It said it was passed as amended, but in conversations I've had with folks since that hearing that are plugged into the process, what passed was the same language as what the Senate passed before, which
Yeah.
does not include the House amendment and does not include the change in the terms for.
The length of the terms and that sort of
directors
thing, right?
and
Well, that was a good bill. I mean, that was kind of where we wanted to
Well-
go, just to,
Well, but to go back to this issue of it ain't over till it's over.
right.
It's been approved by the committee.
Uh-huh.
According to the information I had as of yesterday, it has not yet left the committee chair's office to
Mhm.
go to the floor.
Mhm.
So this compressed time period on the floor where anything can happen.
Mhm.
It can pass as, sent out of committee. It can be amended.
Yeah,
It can die for reasons of the substance of the bill. It can die for reasons that have nothing to do with the bill because there's something else that chews up time in the Senate. So you can't get any assurance at this point in the session about what's going to happen.
Mhm.
That's one of those bills. That's one of those bills that is still alive. It still has legs, but we can't tell you at this point what's going to happen in the next 2 weeks. It's going to be a long night on Memorial Day.
Yeah.
In
Uh-huh.
the folks in the House and the Senate. It's going to be a long day.
Bill, your reference, is that the one that where Metcalf made the amendment proposal?
That's the one that
Yeah.
is referring to. That's one of a number of bills that we're still tracking.
What about the bill for the lobbyist?
That bill is another one that we can't tell you what's gonna happen. It's passed out of the Senate. It has been in the House. It has not passed out of the House. And so that was Senate Bill 175 that was passed fairly early in the session by Senator Middleton and was sent over to the House, but has not yet passed the House as of, I think it was this weekend or yesterday when I was going through bills again.
Well, I've heard a lot about the negative perspective on that bill. What's the positive perspective? Why would this, perhaps you're unable to answer this, but why would Senator Middleton feel that this is an unwise use of public funds?
Well, I think there's differences of opinion on the use of public funds to lobby. Some folks say it's just not a good use of public funds to pay lobbyists, period, full stop. Some folks on the other side will say that, well, there's benefit to having voices on both sides of an issue, especially when the legislation could impact one of those sides. I think a lot of what is somewhat speculation has brought it to a head as part of this friction between some city governments, municipalities, and the state government, and the power of the TML lobbying and teachers unions and some others, and as it comes to vouchers. So you start to see this kind of issue blur where it blurs across multiple bills and topics. And this one is is one of those, is the sense that I get.
I think the objection is they don't want tax money going to lobbyists that might be lobbying against the taxpayers' interest. I can't think of anything here that affects the MUDs, but that the teachers' unions might be lobbying against what parents want. And yeah, and we're using our taxes to pay against us.
The
Are
teachers
those
union,
public funds in
funds.
teachers union?
Well, so
It's
the,
membership.
No, the
Bill,
lobbyists, we're
yeah.
talking about lobbyists.
Yeah.
Representing the teachers.
But I mean, I don't see how that would come unless I don't understand the process. I thought that the teachers paid into their union dues
Mhm.
and then the union dues fund the
Okay.
lobbyists, which has nothing to do with public.
Mhm.
I don't think.
I'm hearing that there's some public funds, there's a move to ban taxpayer-funded lobbying,
Right.
period.
I don't see where this teachers unions falls under that. Maybe I'm wrong.
well, there've been a lot of different iterations of how far that, that sort of restriction would go if it was a direct hiring of a lobbyist by political subdivision, if it was indirect through public funds that was fed to some other organization that hired a lobbyist. There's a lot, I mean, there's been a lot of different iterations and discussions about that. So number one, don't know that anything's gonna pass out of the House at this point, but it has been introduced. This is I think this is the third time that it's been introduced. It was initially introduced on the House side. It was Representative Middleton then and moved to the Senate this session. So it's, if it doesn't pass this time, we'll probably see it again. It's just one of those
Easy
issues.
way to work around that. So, I mean, I hadn't worried about it. But if you need somebody in there knowing what's happening with the bill, you just call them something different.
Well,
That's what
yeah,
I've seen.
and if something passes, it's gonna put the onus on elected officials to go and do the direct outreach. I mean, depending on what's prohibited and what would, it could prohibit, direct outreach from employees that have funds from taxpayers, but elected officials that may have to do more direct outreach, but it's one of those, we'll see what happens.
I was a lobbyist for the Attorney General's office, but I wasn't called a lobbyist
Yeah.
just because of that,
Well, there's.
I monitored what
Yeah,
bills
there's all
were there.
kinds of
Yeah.
when you have to register as a lobbyist and what actions constitute lobbying, but that's a whole other ball of wax. All right,
Anything?
I think that covers it. Again, if you're interested just in what's going on in general in the session, I'd say go look at the video from the summary from last week. It goes over a few more bills than what we covered today.
The video
Which-
summary from last week.
Trustee meeting.
Okay, I will.
Oh,
Thank you. That'll help.
Okay, very good. Thank you, Brian.
Yep.
Agenda item 14, receive the general manager's report, pages 67 through 76.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Point out a few things on my report. Our annual hydrant audit and flushing program is complete, so we're going through the results of that, addressing any issues that were found with the flushing of the hydrants. Wanted to point out on page 75 and 76, you'll see a picture of pretty significant damage on a ground structure.
Is this the sinkhole that's referenced in someplace in here?
No.
Okay.
No, that's something new. It's located on the map there, right around the southwest tip of 7. Right in that corner, there's F1, F2 ditch that goes into Spring Creek there. And so this is on the
You're talking
feeder.
about right here.
Right there. There you go.
Okay.
There's a little Y shape. There's a Y of 2 ditches. It's right after that Y as it's about to tie into Spring Creek there. That's what that picture is. We are looking at seeing what would need to be done, talking with our engineer to identify, this isn't just removing that and fixing it, it's pretty significant. So we'll be looking at that. We'll have hopefully some recommendations for you next month on which direction to go on that.
So is this an all mud fix? Or is it a 7? Is it a
60 and 7.
60 and 7?
Both months.
Both months would feed into that.
Majority is mud 7, but you've got a little piece of it.
You see that little tiny blue there?
Mhm. So it
Oh,
doesn't
I see.
go
I
up
see,
into the major part of 60.
Now, is that what was on?
It's that part.
It's right there.
More to come on that. Did want to point out a handful of customer thank yous to our staff, both field and in-office staff, both on their timing and friendliness and speed of service. So we always appreciate hearing good news. I did want to point out, I'm wanting to have John each month give a quick update on the strategic communication plan that's in place. We're doing a lot of good things on the communication front. And as we start heading into this bigger campaign that you saw in the budget there, and a RFP for a PR campaign, and those things are moving forward in the background. But John's been working quite a bit on implementing the strategic communication plan since last fall. So I wanted to have him kind of talk a little bit about some updates and things that are going on for your notification.
Thank you.
Hello.
Hello?
Just as a point of order, Shelley, in the future, could we put this as a bullet point below the general manager's report? An update from, on the PEC from John Geiger? Thank you.
You're moving on up.
It's a target, John. Don't.
Yeah, I'm getting overly
It's the
excited.
bullseye center of the target.
Well, I'm just gonna hit some quick highlights for you here on what we've been up to the last month or so. We're exiting the second quarter of our strategic plan, which the focus there has been on water quality. Next month, we'll segue into water conservation, which is timely given the summer months and the heightened emphasis on water use. So you'll see a little bit a bit of a change there in some of our marketing. But I want to back up on, I included purposely this a little bit of research there at the top of your communications report on page 72, which speaks to one of the things we're trying to do here, which is get more information out, touch more people, and touch all of the segments of our community. It's a work in progress, but it's critical. People who recall having received communication from their water utility in the last year report higher satisfaction with their water than those who don't recall any communication. Right, so just having heard from us, just knowing we're reaching out, we're there, we're touching them with good news, bad news, and everything in between makes a difference in how they perceive us. And obviously that's going to be critical going forward as we want to develop more understanding, trust, and support for some of the things that are coming down the pike. So just getting more information out is key. You did that yourselves about 6 weeks ago with your year-end report. I have some metrics for you on that I think you might find interesting.
Yeah, you know who's opened and all the analytics on that. And then I think Dale got some feedback from neighbors and stuff.
Oh, good. Well, we want data and both quantitative and qualitative.
Okay.
So all that input is important. So you guys hit, you sent it out digitally, and with the water bill, you have 4,140 accounts. 67% are covered via our constant contact email list. 62% of those folks that we emailed to open. That's awesome. You had
Wow,
the-
yeah.
You had the highest rating.
I think it was the ARC on there. I believe that's.
It was definitely. Still that, as far as the folks that did open, that was 38% of all of your accounts. Okay. So that means that's a good number. It is, but we need to reach out in other ways. You did that with the print piece. That hits 69% of your accounts. So I don't know where the gap is with those two numbers, but you reached most. And we saw upticks in website traffic corresponding to that as well. You had 136 clicks off your email onto your report. So folks paid attention, they saw it, they saw it in different ways. That's key. Just hearing from you is critical, and many more actually went through your report. The data is showing. We're seeing upticks in website traffic in general. We've seen a 12% increase in monthly page views since last September. Want to keep moving that up. We are down significantly from where we were a couple years ago. Not sure why yet.
I think it's because I'm always trying to find something.
That would push the numbers up.
Yeah.
That's what I'm saying. He said they were up.
So we've got work to do, but I think we're headed in the right direction. If you're not tuned into the week of eBlast, please do so. It's a great way to see, great way to get some good information for you yourself, and then also see the types of messages we're putting out. We have 22,000 plus contacts on that list. And we've got a pretty consistent 55% open rate.
What I opened this week was great stuff.
Oh, good.
Very good, all the way to the bottom.
Well, and that, so that then goes, that fuels our Facebook content.
Mm-hmm.
That Facebook feed is now on our webpage, all our web pages. We're trying to cross-pollinate between different formats. So good. Hopefully you'll see that content in other places too. We've seen some successes with our marketing. We have really good engagement rates, which means it's not just posting on the website. People are actually seeing it, interacting with it, clicking on it.
Do you have any numbers on this ad and people opening the QR thing? Is there a way to analyze that?
I can get to that. It's
Yeah.
a little tougher because that's primarily a print medium. They do have a digital presence, but most folks are seeing that via print. And so we'd have to correspond when that drops on the first to, actually wouldn't be that hard.
You could only get it.
It drops
if
around the
it's-
first of
If it's
the month and it's
digital,
on the site.
then would be in a magazine or something. You couldn't get any. Well, of
Probably-
course you couldn't.
It
Yeah.
gets a little noisy because we have other ads dropping at the similar
Mhm.
time. But excellent question. I mean, I can get a sense of it.
Mhm.
But we know that piece of Willis Community Magazine is key. We pay a lot for it, pay $1,500 a month.
Mhm.
But we get a large 2/3 page ad, and we almost always get a 300 piece article in there.
Mhm.
Next focal point is on water conservation. Any questions?
Had some questions for you, but forgotten them now. Oh, okay. I've got actually Summer answered them.
Okay. Well, thank you.
Thank you, John.
Yeah.
Very good. Appreciate your input. Anything else on the GM report, Peterson?
I was just gonna give a quick, note that at the trustees meeting, we did give a presentation of the proposed new billing software. And that's all I had. Sure you have more.
Not really, no. I'm always scrambling to try and keep my wits about me at the trustees meeting. Maureen, is there any update on that Veritex? What was the name of that firm? Veritex? Not since Wednesday. And, okay, good. Very good. Any questions from what was provided in the trustees report by this board? I'll be most happy to attempt together with General Manager Peterson, response to that information.
It sounds like that Mr. Stopner,
Stopner?
he was just making comments. He wasn't a member.
That is correct.
Well, that
That
guy knows what he's talking
we
about.
had
as far
three
as I'm
people
concerned.
that gave
Mhm.
public
And,
comment.
not knowing people in the legislature and being a foreigner to this land. Charles Perry knows what he's talking about. And he did it in such a gentlemanly way and statesmanlike way to the presentation that they got, which was all over the place. So good to know.
Yeah, the trustees summary is 77 through 82.
And
Having been there, I thought we covered everything excellently in the meeting, so I don't know why there would be further questions. You summarized them very well, Mr. Peterson. Hearing no further questions, we'll move on to agenda item 16. Closed session, not this month, not this month. Yeah. Okay, agenda item 18, discuss any matters for placement on future agendas.
just,
Anybody have
already
anything?
talked about public relations. stuff.
Mhm. Hearing none, move this meeting adjourned.
Thank you.
Thank you.